Hello students, welcome to this session of Drugs Inside Out, in which we are going to talk about the important drugs which is very much needed for your practice and also for your exams. We are going to talk about amphotericin B. Please note that this amphotericin B is one of the most toxic systemically used antibiotic. This amphotericin B is the most toxic systemically used antibiotic, and also amphotericin B comes under the classification of polyenes. Among polyenes, this amphotericin B is the least toxic among other polyenes. Please note, this is an important one, guys. This is about amphotericin B. From where is amphotericin B derived from? Amphotericin B is actually taken up from Streptomyces nodosus. Streptomyces nodosus, from this we are deriving two different types of amphotericin. We have amphotericin A and amphotericin B. Amphotericin A is currently not being used nowadays, but amphotericin B is being used. That is what currently we are utilizing for the treatment of mucormycosis. The recent search, not only for mucormycosis, for many other conditions also we can use amphotericin B. This amphotericin B itself is not going to be used as such. This amphotericin B is there on colloidal suspension. Amphotericin B is there on colloidal suspension. It is mixed along with sodium deoxycholate. This is the normal conventional amphotericin B. This amphotericin B is an amphoteric polyene molecule. Amphoteric polyene molecule. What is a polyene, guys? Polyene means any drug molecule which has got many double bonds in its structure. So what's the basic structure of amphotericin B? This amphotericin B, simply to say, is a donut shaped molecule. This amphotericin B is a donut shaped molecule. In this donut shape, the outermost area is full of double bonds. The outermost rim is full of double bonds. That's why this drug is a polyene molecule. And the inner part, the center core, is rich with, the central part is rich with OH groups. The central part is rich with hydroxyl groups. Central part is rich with hydroxyl groups. So the outermost part is mixed with the double bonds and the central part is mixed with hydroxyl group. This is a donut shaped molecule. So what is the mechanism of action, guys? Whenever this drug is being administered to a human being who has already been infected with a fungal infection, consider this is the fungal cell wall. Fungal cell membrane is made up of what type of cholesterol, guys? It is not made up of the usual cholesterol which is there in the human beings. It is going to be there with ergosterol, right? It is going to be made up with, the fungal cell wall is made up with ergosterol. This ergosterol is going to be binding strongly with those double bond areas, with these polyene areas. So what happens? This donut molecule is going to be binding in this manner. This donut molecule is going to be binding in this manner. The outermost double bond is going to bind with this ergosterol, and we have a central core of molecule, and we have a central core of this hydroxyl group. Clear? So what are the different things? We have this double bond area, and this is ergosterol which is binding with the ergosterol, and we have the inner OH rich side is there on the center. Because of its binding with ergosterol, there is going to be leakage of contents from the inside towards outside. Via this hydroxyl rich area, there is going to be leakage of intracellular contents. And this is one of the most important reasons why the fungus tend to stop multiplying and also tend to die. One mechanism. We also have one more mechanism, and that is this amphotericin B also might induce oxidative damage to the oxidative damage to the fungal cells. So two major mechanisms are involved in how this amphotericin B is going to bind with the ergosterol and cause this disruption of the cell wall. So it is going to produce artificial pores on the membrane. Because of this artificial pores, there is going to be leakage of content. This is the primary mechanism behind it. So from this, what can we find out per se? Is it a is it a fungistatic or is it a fungicidal agent, guys? Majority of the points used to say that it's a fungicidal agent, but please note that it is not uniformly a fungicidal agent. When given at low doses, it behaves as a fungistatic agent. It just stops the multiplication of the fungus. But when given at high doses, it behaves as a fungicidal agent. When given at low doses, it behaves as fungistatic. When given at high doses, it behaves as fungicidal agent. So from this, we have seen the mechanism of action of amphotericin B, from which we are also going to talk about how the resistance is going to be developed. I think resistance shouldn't be dealt with separately. It has to be dealt along with the mechanism of action. So how come the resistance is going to be developed? Resistance is developed by two major mechanisms, guys. One is decreased membrane concentration of ergosterol. The first mechanism of how the fungus is going to gain resistance is it decreases the membrane concentration of ergosterol. So there is no place to bind for amphotericin B to cause the leakage of interstellar ions, or also to cause oxidative damage. The next one, there is going to be a modified sterol target molecule. Modified sterol target molecule. Sterol target molecule is nothing but it is going to bind with a particular part of the ergosterol, right? And that particular part of the ergosterol is going to be compromised. It is going to be modified. So the amphotericin B is not going to bind with that particular molecule. So because of it, it is going to decrease the binding of amphotericin B with the ergosterol. So the whole mechanism of resistance is entirely based on its binding with ergosterol, guys. Please remember. So which part of amphotericin B binds with ergosterol? The double bond side is going to bind with ergosterol. The central hydrophilic area is going to be involved in leakage of intracellular ions. Clear? Now, moving on to the next one, we're going to talk about the pharmacokinetic features of amphotericin B. We're going to talk about PK features of amphotericin B. Again, what is pharmacokinetics, guys? We have four major components, right, in pharmacokinetics: A, D, M, and E. Absorption, distribution, metabolism, and excretion. Four major components are there. What is which for amphotericin B? As per absorption is concerned, this drug has got a very poor peroral absorption. Very poor peroral absorption. I'm not talking about first pass metabolism, guys, right? First pass metabolism happens after the drug is getting absorbed, after it has gained entry into the liver, and there the first pass metabolism happens. This drug, the absorption itself is poor, which means the drug is not going to move even from the intestine. It remains within the intestines itself. So, can we give amphotericin B via peroral route? No, it is of no use. But I can utilize this for a particular fungal infection, which is confined only to the intestines. It can be given via peroral route, guys. There is no peroral amphotericin B. No, we have a peroral amphotericin B, but it can be given only for upper GI fungal infections. It can be used only for upper GI fungal infections alone. This is about absorption, guys. What about distribution? As far as distribution is concerned, this drug is very highly plasma protein bound. More than 90% is plasma protein bound. Especially what type of plasma proteins is going to bind with beta lipoproteins. Amphotericin B is going to bind with beta lipoproteins. The next one, only 2 to 3% is an important point, guys. Only 2 to 3% reaches the cerebrospinal fluid. Very minimal amount is going to reach the cerebrospinal fluid. So that's the reason amphotericin B is not going to be useful that much for fungal meningitis. But wait, we can still use amphotericin B for fungal meningitis, right? So how can we use it for fungal meningitis? Because in terms of inflammation, whenever the meninges are inflamed, the movement of amphotericin B is going to be facilitated. More concentration will reach the central nervous system. I hope you can understand the concept, guys. The same concept also applies for penicillins too. Penicillin normally will not cross the central nervous system. But if in case the meninges are inflamed, more CSF concentrations can be seen with that. Okay? That's it about the distribution concept. Metabolism. Metabolism, please note that around 60% is getting metabolized, and most importantly, hepatic or renal dysfunction. In terms of hepatic or renal dysfunction, there is no need for dose adjustment. In hepatic or renal dysfunction, there is no need for dose adjustments. Please remember that. We'll talk about that more when we study about the adverse effects of amphotericin B. And about excretion, this drug is excreted out in the urine, and most importantly, it has got a T-half of around 15 days. It has got a T-half of around 15 days. These are the classical pharmacokinetic features of amphotericin B. Moving on to the next one, we're going to talk about the uses. We're going to talk about the uses of amphotericin B. Most important point, this drug is one of the broadest spectrum antifungal agent. Broadest spectrum antifungal agent, right? But from this, I'm going to talk about two major important points, guys. Yes, it is a broader spectrum. It acts against many different funguses, but it is not going to be useful against two major species of fungus. Candida lusitania and Pseudoleuceria boydii. Pseudoleuceria boydii and Candida lusitaniae. In these two different funguses, this drug is not going to be effective because these two different fungi are intrinsically resistant to amphotericin B. Clear? One point. The next important point is, even though this drug is one of the broadest spectrum antifungal agent, we don't use it for dermatophyte infections. For dermatophytes, we commonly don't use amphotericin B. Why? Why is it? Because it is effective against dermatophytes, but the concentration of amphotericin B, which reaches the dermal layers, dermal skins, and also in nails, is very much lesser. Right, so if you administer it via systemic route, via parenteral route, the concentration of drug to reach this dermatophyte area is going to be very much minimal. So that's why it is not being used right now for the treatment of dermatophytes. It is not used against dermatophytes because less concentration is achieved. These are the two major concepts from which we derive it from its broad spectrum activity. The next important point, this drug is not usually used as an initial therapy. It is commonly used as an induction therapy. It is often used as an induction therapy. Followed by azoles. Why? Because it decreases the fungal burden immediately. Once the fungal burden is going to be decreased, we can replace the drugs with many other drugs, especially we utilize azoles for this condition. Similarly, for mucormycosis also, we don't utilize amphotericin B till the climax, till the discharge of the patient. We give amphotericin B, we decrease the fungal burden, followed by we give azoles so that we can decrease the adverse drug reaction probability of amphotericin B. Clear? The next important point is, this drug can be given along with flucytosine. For the treatment of cryptococcal meningitis. And why is it? Because why not for other conditions, and why not with other drugs, or why only with flucytosine is, amphotericin B with flucytosine has got supra-additive effects. And one more important interaction is the rifampicin, the anti-mycobacterial drug. Rifampicin and one of the most important tetracyclines, the minocycline, the most important tetracycline, that is minocycline, tend to potentiate the activity of amphotericin B. Most important drug interaction, guys. Rifampicin and minocycline tend to potentiate the effect of amphotericin B. Is that clear? We can also utilize it in future if in case the amphotericin B's effect is not up to the mark for a particular patient. We can add rifampicin to potentiate its activity. And what are the different routes of administration, and also the other important points about amphotericin B. The first one, we have topical amphotericin B2. We have topical amphotericin B. It can be used for mycotic corneal ulcers and also in terms of keratitis. Not only that, we have subconjunctival injections too. We can also be utilized for this keratitis infections. The next one, we can administer amphotericin B as intra-articular injections. We can administer amphotericin B as intra-articular injections, especially for, as the name itself implies, fungal arthritis. We can utilize this drug. For fungal arthritis, we can give amphotericin B as intra-articular injections. The next one, intravesical. Intravesical for candiduria. For candiduria, we can just instill this amphotericin B into the bladder. By administering into the bladder, don't worry about central absorption, because if you administer this amphotericin B into the bladder, it has got very least chances of systemic toxicity. Like how we have topical routes. Topical routes also tend to produce topical systemic toxicity, but intravesical route will not produce that much amount of systemic toxicity which you ever think of. Not only that, it can also be given as intraperitoneal dialysate fluid. Intraperitoneal dialysate fluid also we can administer this drug. Lastly, intrathecal also we can administer amphotericin B, but mostly we don't prescribe this. Why is it? Because intrathecal route can be utilized, can be given like 0.5 milligrams, can be given twice weekly for fungal meningitis. We can administer this drug twice weekly for fungal meningitis, but intrathecal route of administration might produce severe CNS toxicity, guys. Severe CNS toxicity, the patient might land up in seizures or even severe cases like nerve palsy. So usually we don't prescribe intrathecal amphotericin B. But even if we want to administer any drug for fungal meningitis, your azoles, especially fluconazole, is one of the other better alternatives, because it achieves higher concentration in the cerebrospinal fluid. Is that clear? These are the different routes of administrations of amphotericin B, guys. Coming towards the last and the most important one, the adverse effects of amphotericin B. The adverse effects of amphotericin B. Amphotericin B can produce two different sets of adverse effects, guys. One, it might be because of infusion related reactions, or it might be due to cumulative toxicity. Cumulative toxicity means because of accumulation of drug in the body, there might be toxicity symptoms, that is cumulative toxicity, and infusion related reactions immediately due to this infusion which we start as per amphotericin B is concerned. As per infusion related reactions is concerned, which is more severe? As per severity, the amphotericin B in colloidal dispersion, ABCD means amphotericin B in colloidal dispersion causes most infusion related reactions, followed by conventional amphotericin B. Conventional amphotericin B means the same sodium deoxycholate, the same that is called as conventional amphotericin B, followed by amphotericin B in lipid complex. ABLC means amphotericin B in lipid complex, followed by liposomal amphotericin B. Liposomal amphotericin B. So, which causes least infusion related reactions, guys? Liposomal amphotericin B causes least infusion related reactions, whereas maximum infusion related reactions can be seen with amphotericin B in colloidal dispersion. Clear? And why these reactions are seen, guys? Why is this seen? Because of the release of cytokines. Because of the release of cytokines, interleukins, TNF alpha. Because of these different molecules, because of these different cytokines, there might be development of infusion related reactions. What are the other applications of it? How can we prevent it? How can we prevent it? We have to administer slow infusion rate. The drug shouldn't be administered at higher doses. It has to be started at slow infusion rate, and the dose escalation must be very much slow. How we administer carbamazepine? We had to start at low. Start low, go slow. I hope you remember that. Start low and go slow is the universal phenomena for administering carbamazepine. A similar concept for amphotericin B also. We have to start at low doses, and go slow means the dose escalation must be very much lower. gradual escalation of doses. How can we treat it, or how can we prevent it? How can we treat our prevention? We have to opt for pre-medication. We have to opt for pre-medication before administering intravenous infusion. Pre-medication done with, what are the different pre-medications which we have currently before administering amphotericin B? We can opt for antipyretics. We can go for antihistaminergic agents. Even opioids can be given. Opioids like meperidine. Opioids like meperidine can be given as pre-medications, and steroids can be given even as a treatment too. If infusion-related reactions comes, we can opt for steroids, especially hydrocortisone can be given. Especially injection hydrocortisone can be given. 0.6 milligrams per kilogram is the usual dose which we administer for hydrocortisone. These are the different pre-medications which we have to prevent and also to treat the infusion-related reactions due to amphotericin B. Moving on to the next one, we're going to talk about the cumulative toxicity, guys. As per cumulative toxicity is concerned, the most important toxicity which we ever have is renal. Why is it? Because more than 80% of the cases will report renal related adverse effects, kidney related adverse effects, and these kidney related adverse effects are dose dependent in nature. As the dose increases, the renal toxicity also is going to be increased out. We have two major components in this renal toxicity, guys. One is called as the reversible component and irreversible component. Reversible and irreversible components. This reversible components is due to decreased renal perfusion. This reversible components is due to decreased renal perfusion. The irreversible components is due to renal tubular injury. Please remember these two different nomenclatures, guys. Which is responsible for reversible components because of decreased renal perfusion. Renal tubular injury will lead on to an irreversible loss in terms of renal functions. And also, this decreased renal perfusion might produce a particular type of renal failure, which is a pre-renal failure. Pre-renal renal failure can be expected with the reversible components, but this renal tubular injury, on the other hand, can be seen only when the dose is more than 4 grams. When the cumulative dose of amphotericin B is more than 4 grams, we can expect this irreversible toxicity. But this reversible component, this pre-renal renal failure, which is especially seen due to decreased renal perfusion, can be counteracted. It can be prevented. This reversible component can be prevented by sodium loading, by loading the patient with sodium. Attenuated by sodium loading. So, before administering amphotericin B, it is always advisable to fastly infuse normal saline. So, first infuse normal saline. Why is it? Because we prevent the development of pre-renal failure by allowing a better renal perfusion, by preventing the reversible component of the renal failure, which might be possible in more than 80% of cases treated with amphotericin B. Is that clear? One more point, whenever you administer amphotericin B, it is always better to be administered along with the dextrose solution. Instead of normal saline, it shouldn't be mixed with normal saline, it has to be mixed with the dextrose solution. But apart from that, there is a possibility of renal tubular acidosis too. There is a possibility of distal renal tubular acidosis with hypokalemia and hypomagnesemia. Distal renal tubular acidosis with hypokalemia and hypomagnesemia can be possible. This hypokalemia is common in more than 25% of the patients who are treated with amphotericin B. So, how can we treat these patients? We can opt for potassium chloride supplementation. Potassium chloride has to be given in those patients to prevent the development of hypokalemia, because hypokalemia has got adverse cardiac outcomes. These are the two major adverse effects which can be expected as per the infusion related and cumulative related toxicity is concerned. Apart from the kidney component, it also tends to produce certain other areas too. One is it might produce liver damage. There is a possibility of hepatotoxicity associated with amphotericin B. Rarely, guys. The patients might develop reversible normocytic hypochromic anemia, Reversible normocytic hypochromic anemia can be expected because of again decreased renal perfusion, because of pre-renal issues. There might be decreased erythropoietin production. There might be decreased erythropoietin production, and because of it, the patients might be landing up in anemia too. When given via intrathecal route, as we've already explained, when given via intrathecal route, the patients might land up in seizures, and also some patients might land up in chemical arachnoiditis. Chemical arachnoiditis can also be expected with amphotericin B. The next one, anemia, and also it is followed up by thrombocytopenia, and it can be combined with granulocyte colony stimulating factor analog, that is filgrastim. That is filgrastim, to prevent the development of neutropenia. To prevent neutropenic episodes, it can be combined with granulocyte colony stimulating factor analog, that is filgrastim. And why is it called as filgrastim? Because it is a granulocyte stimulating factor, granulocyte colony stimulating factor. So it can be given along with this. These are the different ADRs which we have till now. Clear? Now, apart from this, we are going to talk about one important point, the last one regarding this session. We are going to talk about liposomal amphotericin B. Liposomal amphotericin B. What are the advantages of this liposomal amphotericin B? The advantages is, the first one, there is chances of less acute infusion related reactions. The infusion related reactions are very much lesser. And the next one, patients who do not tolerate conventional amphotericin B can be treated with this liposomal amphotericin B. Currently, this is the drug of choice in treatment of many different conditions. Clear? And the next one, most importantly, there is less chances of nephrotoxicity. Please again remember, I am not writing no nephrotoxicity, I am writing less nephrotoxicity, which means there is a chance of nephrotoxicity, but the chances are lesser as compared to your conventional amphotericin B. Anemia is going to be minimal. The hematologic ADRs is going to be minimal. And most importantly, this liposomal amphotericin B is delivered to the reticuloendothelial system, is delivered to the reticuloendothelial cells. As it is delivered directly to the reticuloendothelial cells, this drug liposomal amphotericin B can also be used for the treatment of Kala-Azar, leishmaniasis, Kala-Azar, and also in terms of immunocompromised patients too. In terms of immunocompromised patients too, we can administer this liposomal amphotericin B. Simply, any immunocompromised patients, if he or she is being treated with amphotericin B, it raises their, it actually helps them to fight the fungal infections. Clear? So, immunocompromised patients, if they land up in fungal infections, we have to opt for amphotericin B, the most important drug. And it can be infused at higher rates. It can be infused at higher rates. Why is it? Because in case of conventional amphotericin B, because of its probability to produce infusion related reactions, always, as I've already explained, slow, it has to be started slow and the escalation must be gradual. That is not necessary in terms of liposomal amphotericin B, where we can administer up to 3 to 5 milligrams per kilogram dose directly into the veins without opting for a gradual escalation. And the last one, it can be used as an empirical therapy for febrile neutropenia. It can be used as empirical therapy for febrile neutropenia for those patients who are not responding properly. For those patients who are not responding properly to the antibiotics, we can opt for this drug. We also have certain azoles, but out of amphotericin B, we can opt for liposomal amphotericin B. So till now, what all we have seen, guys? We have seen, first we have seen about, in this session of drugs inside out, we have seen about amphotericin B. As a conclusion, I am talking about, first we have seen about what is the name origin, from where it has been derived. Next, we have seen the structure of amphotericin B. Next, we have seen the mechanism of action. What is the mechanism of action, guys? What is the structure? It's donut-shaped molecule. Mechanism of action, it binds with the ergosterol, forms artificial pores, leakage of intracellular ions, oxidative damage, leads on to the death of this particular fungus. Initially, it behaves as static. At high dose, it behaves as serial. Resistance can be developed by altering the ergosterol levels. Then we have seen about the pharmacokinetic features. We have seen about the poor absorption concept, most important one, guys. It has been bounded with beta lipoproteins. and it has been metabolized, 60% is metabolized and it is excreted out by urine. What about the next one? We have seen about the uses of these drugs. What are the different funguses in which amphotericin B is not working against? Why don't we use amphotericin B for dermatophytes? We have seen the different routes of administration of the amphotericin B from topical till intrathecal. Then we have seen about the adverse effects, the infusion related and the cumulative related. Infusion, we have seen about infusion related reactions. Cumulative, we have seen about renal, hematologic, liver damage, and also certain other areas which might be possible on rarer occasions. And the last one we have seen about is liposomal amphotericin B. The advantages of using liposomal amphotericin B, guys. Is that clear? The last one we are going to talk about is the dose of this amphotericin B. Especially in this recent times, we are going to talk about how we are going to use amphotericin B in terms of mucormycosis. The dose of amphotericin B, initially before administering amphotericin B, it is always advisable to go for a test dose. Always advisable to go for a test dose. Test dose of 1 milligram is given IV over a period of 20 minutes. 1 milligram is given IV over a period of 20 minutes is the usual test dose which we administer for amphotericin B. Followed by, we can either opt for liposomal amphotericin B, or if it is not available, we can opt for the conventional amphotericin B. There is amphotericin deoxycholate. We can either opt for liposomal amphotericin B or conventional amphotericin B. If it is liposomal amphotericin B, as we've already explained, we can give little bit higher doses. So usually what we prescribe is we give 5 milligrams per kilogram per day is diluted in 200 ml of 5% dextrose. 200 ml of 5% dextrose, and it is given over a period of 2 to 3 hours infusion. As we've already explained, this drug can be given at large doses within a short span of time because there is less chances of infusion related reactions. On the other hand, here your conventional amphotericin B, we can opt for either 1 milligram per kilogram per day has to be administered. First, it is suspended in 10 ml of water. Then it is mixed with 500 ml of glucose solution. And it is given over a period of 6 to 8 hours. It is not given over a period of 2 to 3 hours. It is given over a period of 6 to 8 hours. At an infusion rate of 0.08 milligrams per kilogram per hour is the infusion rate of conventional amphotericin B. Please note that there is a probability of nephrotoxicity, so it is always an infusion related reaction. So it is always better to administer at low doses and escalate gradually instead of administering larger doses like how we did for liposomal amphotericin B. Clear? This liposomal amphotericin B and also amphotericin B is not preferred to be mixed with NS. It is not mixed with NS, guys, right? Why is this very much important is, usually to prevent the nephrotoxicity, what we do is we preload the patient with 1 pint NS. We preload a patient with 1 pint or 1 liter NS. We preload the patient with 1 liter NS and post-load the patient with 1 liter NS. So before administering amphotericin B, we rush up 1 liter of NS followed by amphotericin B in glucose solution and then 1 liter of NS after the administration of amphotericin B. This will prevent the nephrotoxicity. This prevents development of nephrotoxicity. This prevents development of nephrotoxicity. That is going to be least possible with liposomal amphotericin B, so no need to worry. But if in case, instead of finding time to administer 1 pint of NS and amphotericin B and 1 pint of NS, if in case you mix up amphotericin B with the NS, what is going to happen? It makes the solution more coarser. If the solution becomes more thicker and more coarser, it will be difficult to administer into the veins. Clear? So instead to prevent that, it is usually not mixed with normal saline. It is mixed only with the dextrose solution. Clear? And if the patient is been now the patient is been administered with this, if there is brain involvement, we can also administer up to 10 milligrams per kilogram per day dose of liposomal amphotericin B. Clear? Now, if the patient is intolerant, what's the next step in management? If the patient is intolerant to this dose of amphotericin B, next we can opt for posaconazole. Next, we can opt for posaconazole. Here, as I've already explained, we are talking about the treatment of mucormycosis. Posaconazole, we used to administer 300 milligram BD on day 1. BD on day 1 followed by the same dose 300 milligram OD. 300 milligram OD. After 7 days, TDM is advised. Therapeutic drug monitoring is advised after 7 days of therapy with posaconazole. An important point, guys. Right? Not only that, not only intolerance, even if the patient's fungal load is been decreased after the initial dose of amphotericin B, we can shift over the patient to the next follow-up regimen of azoles. Among this, which azole do we prefer? We prefer giving posaconazole. We also have the next azole drug, that is isavuconazole. Isavuconazole 200 milligram is given thrice daily. TDS is given for 2 days. 200 milligram thrice daily is given for 2 days, followed by 200 milligram OD. Followed by 200 milligram OD. Is that clear, guys? These are the salient features and important points about amphotericin B, and we've also seen about the dose of amphotericin B and its applications in terms of mucormycosis. Thanks a lot, mate. We'll meet up in one more session of Drugs Insight.